I have to admit that before reviews really came out, I was very hesitant about this remake. Not that anything looked bad, just looked okay. Service sort at best, and not really doing much with the source it was using. But they were cooking. They were cooking, and they had enough swinging. But let's start off with the visuals. It's absolutely outstanding. You really feel the fear and tension as you walk through every area you go through. So at the start, when you walk through the streets, as you soon learn, behind every corner and every car, everywhere you go, there could be a monster just waiting to attack you. Especially when you get to the mannequins, just hiding, just standing around corners, and even your radio isn't going off. You've never really truly known fear until you've had to corner check a goddamn fridge. The game starts off obviously right outside of, well, not really right outside, but close to the town. And you're looking over the lake. It's foggy already. You kind of already know what is awaiting you when you get down there. And then every area afterwards has more and more instilling fear with it. One of my favourite parts is the audio that goes along with it as well. I noticed as the game progresses, there is more and more ambient noise, whispers, like people talking, sounds of footsteps following you, that sort of thing. There are times where you feel alone, times when you feel like you're not alone, and times where you feel the same at the same time, if that makes sense. Like, you know you're alone, it's empty, there's nothing around, but at the same time you feel like something's watching you. I hope that makes sense as much as it does in my head. There are moments where you're traversing an empty hallway on the other side, and there's creaking of the old pipes, and there's just something indistinct in the distance. It just really kind of immerses you into the feeling of how James is probably feeling at the time. And it's hard, if not impossible, to just sometimes pause and just take in the scenery, especially at the start and when you're in the town. But even sometimes when you're inside one of the places, so hospital, something like that, it's definitely a benefit to just pause for a second. Another thing is that the game also encourages you to explore and check everywhere, leaving lore notes around, collectibles, of course, with the pictures, and obviously we're watching with ammo and health items, so you've got much more resources for the actual difficult boss fights, but we'll get to that later. So if you haven't yet played it, one, while you're watching this, it's got spoilers. Two, two, do go and explore when you do get the chance. A slightly lesser point is obviously the combat. It's nothing too special. It's more of a serviceable part. This is kind of the same for the original as well, where the combat isn't supposed to be too in-depth. It's just supposed to be something that gets you through the game. It's pretty much the same here. It's slightly, well, obviously quite adjusted from the original. You always have the melee weapon, and throughout the game you get the 3 different guns, and the main combat is either swing and dodge or shoot from a distance. But they kind of know that they didn't really need to do too much with the combat, just make it more modern, because at the end of the day, nobody's playing Silent Hill for the combat. Most of the in-depth comes from the fact that you can have 3 options at all time. Try and sneak past, which you have the option to do by walking, not running, and turning your flashlight off. The game does tell you this through a note. I missed it on my first time around, but it does tell you on a note that you can turn your flashlight off, and it makes you less detectable. You can just try running past if you know where you're going, because the monsters do have a aggro range and will get off you. And then obviously just fighting with your combat, fighting with your melee weapon or your guns. One thing I did notice is that every monster has a attack pattern. So the nurses kind of be hit, they grab on the 4th hit if you go for 4th hit, and then you can dodge out the way. One time you have to dodge faster than the other, so you kind of can work out, and the tells are really obvious once you learn them. So there isn't anything too hard, and I'm pretty sure that the combat difficulty just increases health. But I've only played on standard so far, so that might be different. And there's also one thing to keep in mind is that if you use a ranged weapon, you attract nearby monsters. There's not too many scenarios where this actually really comes in matter, but if you're in like a hallway with 3 monsters in it and you want to take them one at a time, it's better to use melee, so you don't get swarmed and pushed into a corner. On the topic of the combat, the bosses are much better than the original. There's not many of them. I think there's like 5. I haven't actually counted them, but it's fine. It doesn't really matter how many there are. There's not too many of them. Most of the time you're here for the puzzles, which are very difficult. I haven't mentioned yet. But when these bosses do appear, you are in for a challenge. Two of the fights especially stand out to me. They're kind of similar in a way, but it's Angela's father and Maria, or Mary. I'm pretty sure it's Maria, but just in case people don't know which one I'm talking about, that's the final one. As far as I can remember in the original, they kind of just were fights where you kited around the room. There wasn't too much to them. I don't remember them that well, so they can't be that great. But now they both have 3 phases each, with Angela's father chasing you through what I assumed to kind of be a representation of Angela's childhood home, in the usual Silent Hill messed up fashion, and Maria breaking through the floor and taking you through different stages. You know, you start off at the top with her teleporting around, you break through the floor and she starts jumping down appearing from the top, and then in the final phase she's on the floor with all the cage, knives, weapons, whatever you want to call them, and throughout all 3 phases you have these like moths following you as well. It's very interesting, and it's good that there's some variety there, instead of just kiting them around the room and hitting them, which is basically what the first Pyramid Head fight is, and also the second one. Those ones haven't really been adjusted much. They're just trying to change the arena to make it fit more. Because in the original, with the first Pyramid Head fight, you were stuck in a small room, but that was fine because of the tank controls. It was very easy to kite and dodge. Where in this one, I actually found it very difficult to dodge Pyramid Head every time. So I still need to learn his attack patterns, and we're going to do that effectively once again. But no, there's a lot of interesting fights in the game. Right, and to keep it kind of brief, we'll finally talk about the story, which is the most important part if you ask me. The story is basically a one-to-one adaptation of the original, almost, of course, because there are a few changes. There's a few lines changed to add more context. We'll kind of remove certain lines that kind of don't match up with certain endings. In the original, during Angela's last scene, James in the original says he would never kill himself, and then if you get the in water ending, he kills himself, which didn't make sense. That line did get removed, which is fine because it kind of didn't make any sense if you got the in water ending. I'm pretty sure by that point, the ending you're going to get, other than secret endings, has probably been decided internally by the game. But I think there are still a few places where you can change that ending, maybe, if you haven't got points leading too much the other way, so maybe that's why, I don't know. Some lines have also been cleaned up to make them flow better than the original. If you played the original, you know the lines were a bit rough in some areas. Some iconic lines are still in there, like telling Eddie he can't just kill people for the way he looks at him. The original is a lot more iconic, but the new one obviously flows a lot better and it's a bit more seriously delivered. The line delivery by all the voice actors were amazing throughout. They all felt like they were actually the characters and not just people reading from a line. James's VA, Luke Roberts, nailed every scene he was in, which is basically all of them because he's the main character. Mary's VA, I'm going to butcher this name, but I think it's pronounced Salom. I'm not even going to try the second name because, Jesus Christ, I do not speak Swedish. But yeah, no, James steals every single line he's in, which is all of them, of course. I remember specifically the third time we see Maria die, the scream was just nailed. I'm pretty sure it was in one of the trailers as well, so you can see that as well easily on YouTube. Probably can see all of it easily on YouTube now, but it was absolutely, you could felt the pain in each one. And all of this kind of voice work is obviously helped by the animation work. Every scene is kind of filled with the characters reacting in subtle or not so subtle ways in some scenarios, but where it makes sense, of course. The game really kind of knows when to show, not tell. You really don't need to be told what a character is thinking at times, because you can read it on their face, and you can do that in real life as well, of course. So seeing that in a game done so well is always a joy to see. One of my favorite scenes is after James watches the tape and finally remembers what he's done. and you kind of can see the realization and kind of the stages of grief go through his face. You kind of really feel that weight of James's actions at the moment. The quiet scene afterwards with him staring into the blank TV, realizing, remembering what he's done, kind of breaking that mental cage he had himself in with. You kind of just sit there in silence with him. And I did bring up Mary. As for Mary, she gets very little time due to the nature of this game, especially her being, dead. But when her voice actor is there, because most of the time that she's actually there, she's not actually visible. I think the only time you really see her is in the picture and in the tape scene, if I remember correctly. So her two obvious mentions for her is obviously the hallway scene, where you kind of hear her go through that battle of reality, that she's basically been told that she's going to die. Like, she starts off with anger, how she lashes up with those around her, especially James, that she doesn't blame James if she hates her. Messing up my pronouns here, good job. Then, that drifting into regret, bargaining. I'm getting this in the wrong order, but you hear her go through every stage of grief, and you can't help but be kind of broken, because all you can do is walk down a hallway. You can go faster than the saying, and if you do that, I believe you get either if you run past it and don't give a fuck about what she's saying, that's one of the ways you can work towards the Maria ending, if I remember correctly. I think if you run past it but don't give a fuck about Maria, I think you get leave. I think you might have to listen to it, I can't remember. And at the end, in the In Water ending, right now I haven't got the other two endings, I'm currently working on those. Or the two standard endings, I should say. So when you get the In Water ending, she reads out the letter again, extended in its full duration, and you hear these emotions kind of break out, but in a more of a somber way, which is beautiful as well. You can't help but feel depressed by the end of the game, especially if you get the In Water ending, but they're all depressing in their own way. Finally, the puzzles. Some of the puzzles are similar or the same as they were before. A lot of them are changed though, but you do kind of go around and can see references to the original puzzles, which is always nice. I think the main reason for changing the puzzles would be the fact that people who played the original, which is quite a lot of people, would just know every solution and just breeze through the game. They want people to think. At the end of the day, the puzzles are one of the main gameplay elements of this game, so it makes complete sense for them to change it, and I'm not upset by that. Some of them are just changed answers, and some of them are completely changed. Like the original coin one, I'm pretty sure you just had to do once, where now this one, the coin one, tells you a story, which is always nice. And then there's the clock one, which I'm pretty sure is very similar to the original, but the solution is slightly different. But yeah, I've rambled long enough. The last thing I really have to say is that in a time when we have questionable remasters and remakes, that some aren't even necessary and some make the game worse than what it originally was, it's nice to see one that really does the original service and is a direct upgrade from the original in almost every way.